Every time you bring a memory to mind, you bring it out in a kind of fragile form that what you do with it at that point makes a difference to how it's going to be kind of laid down and remembered again.
How does memory work?
It doesn't work like a video recorder. What it does work like is taking everything that you have in your mind at the time at which you're experiencing something and trying to knit that together into a kind of pattern of neuronal activity that is recorded in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, and then gets kind of cascaded out into the rest of the brain. So you get these patterns of activation that become kind of initially laid down kind of tentatively, and then offline, so when you're away from whatever it is you're remembering, you get this kind of replay, this consolidation of those patterns of activity, those patterns of activation. This often happens when you sleep, so people often find that they can remember stuff a lot better when they've slept on something, and so that's when you get the kind of strengthening of the memory. And then when you're kind of bringing it back to mind, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find a way into reactivating some part of that pattern that then kind of reactivates the rest of it. And that's what leads to you kind of often re-experiencing a memory in quite a kind of sensorially rich way.
It kind of sounds to me like we write it down in pencil a little bit. We sleep on it, decide if we're really going to write it down in pen, but then we have to come back to it to keep it going. Is that's
definitely one way of thinking about it. Like, or you could think about it as like as like an orchestra, where each instrument is playing a tune at the time of the memory, and if you decide that that thing is particularly significant, that thing is important, that thing needs to be remembered, then that tune that was being played by each instrument kind of goes into a kind of soft storage, and that's where you start like practicing that tune a bit. All of those instruments kind of keep working on it until they can hopefully get back to exactly the tune they were playing when you're trying to remember that thing.
How good would you say our memory is?
I'd say our memory is brilliant. Most of the time, it gets most of the things correct. And I think when it goes wrong, it can cause pretty difficult problems. Family dinners, that's a good example of when it goes wrong, because two people, me and my sister, can try and reminisce about the same situation or the same event, and we'll have different memories of the same event. Well, one of us has to be right and one of us has to be wrong, but kind of our own personal memory serves us well for what we want to remember and what our like story is from that event. So in that way, memory is great. It's our best friend, and it serves to like maintain who we are and what we need to know about their past. But in terms of something objective, because it's not an exact copy of something from the past, it is fallible. So it's a wonderful system. Most of the time, you won't know when it goes wrong. But every now and then, everybody's had that experience of remembering something differently from somebody else, which just goes to show that there's always a bias in your own memory towards yourself.
Even though we have that memory bias, is our bias correct in the sense that, like, are we recalling the things that we'd paid attention to as they happened, or are we even influencing our own bias? Like, no, that I can't think of an example, but does this make sense? Like, are we remembering something as it happened through our lens, or are we changing the memory as it comes in and gets recorded? Like,
one of the things, of course, we do, just like a computer system, is trying to reduce the amount of storage that we have to do. So we make generalizations. So we want, instead of, remembering a specific instance of a specific time, if it's something similar to something else, we'll kind of construct a kind of general pattern or a general picture. And in fact, in family arguments about memories, it's often like that. It's because you'll say, oh, yeah, well, Uncle Peter was there because Uncle Peter was usually there. But then somebody will have a memory of him not being there. And then you'll have a stupid debate about whether your uncle was present at the dinner or not. So it's a great question, but I think there's biases which are due to in the moment and where your attention is and what you're looking at and what you're thinking about. But then there's also these kinds of biases which are added, later on down the line.
Would this be a way to kind of summarize it in my mind? Is that like our memory is kind of like a puzzle, and if we're missing the puzzle piece, our brain just fills it in with what we think probably would have been in there, whether it was actually there or not.
Right. Exactly. And you think about that puzzle. You think about that puzzle as a movie, right? And then you've got this kind of spotlight of attention moving around during that movie. You're kind of filling in all the gaps based on where the attention has been, what you've noticed before. You're assuming nothing has changed. And you're also filling in all the bits that you never attended to at all because they were just pretty normal.
Is there a way to quantify like how much a memory will change over time? Like if I go back to it, the home run that I hit was 300 feet and now it's 320 feet.
Yeah.
And now it's 350 feet.
I don't know if there is for any one individual a way of doing that. And certainly that's one of the aspects of memory which is interesting. Each time you retrieve something, you get something back from memory, you will be, without doubt, kind of modifying it slightly and then laying it down differently for the next time that you get it. So the more you think about these things and the more you repeat them, usually the more they drift away from what the actual truth was at the start of the memory.
Is this a big problem? Like, do you view this as a big problem, that the idea of like, well, what's true? And the answer is we kind of don't know.
I mean, obviously we can all generate times when it is a problem, but in general, I mean, I'll go back to what I said before. I mean, memory is brilliant. It's not a problem. It's evolved like that. It's supposed to be like that. And it's like that so you can act on your feet quickly. You can make quick decisions. You can make generalizations. You can maybe even predict the future a bit better based on kind of making an average of everything you've encountered in the past.
To maybe crystallize this in my mind a little bit, it's the kind of thing where you don't need to remember if the tiger had 13 stripes or 15 stripes. You just need to know that the tiger was dangerous, because if you get caught up on the idea if it was 13 or 15, you're wasting your time. Just run.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. We only need so much information to act appropriately. And then, we need to be scared when we see a tiger. We don't need to say, hey, wait a minute, the last tiger I saw. One, two, three, yeah.
How does our brain kind of decide what we're going to remember and what we're not going to? This is one of those mysteries, right, of psychology, of neuroscience. But that process of deciding what you're going to remember is actually a really important part of kind of filtering what's important and what isn't. So there's a certain amount of that consolidation, that offline process when you're not actually going through something that kind of prunes away irrelevant stuff. There's probably an awful lot of frontal input. So the frontal cortex is the part of the brain that we think about as being responsible for higher order cognition. So it keeps our kind of hopes and dreams going whilst we're kind of navigating the world and trying to kind of just deal with all of the sensory input that we're dealing with. The frontal cortex almost certainly feeds into this kind of pruning process, allowing some bits to fade away into obscurity and other memories to kind of stand the test of time.
So when we remember something, I think of like a computer and some sort of physical process happening in my brain. When we remember something, is there a physical thing that is happening? Like, oh, the brain just created a new memory and it put it here. Can you see that, or is that not how it works?
Well, so the hippocampus is really important, right? Without a hippocampus, people can't lay down new memories. So the hippocampus is almost like the kind of the recording head on an old-fashioned cassette recorder. Without that, you can't lay down new memories. But what we know is that we get this this shift away from the hippocampus and into the kind of the rest of the brain, the further away in time we get from the point at which that memory was laid down. So there's initially this reliance on a kind of region of the brain to do the heavy work of kind of recording that memory. But then later that memory kind of becomes part of the kind of the fabric of our brains, and it just becomes another layer onto which we start layering more and more knowledge. So there's undoubtedly distinct patterns of neural firing that replicate what was happening when the memory was being kind of encoded. Those happen when we're retrieving memories, but by the time those memories become kind of consolidated and part of, let's say, part of yourself, your idea of yourself, they're just part of the kind of overall pattern of activation that your brain might kind of slip into.
When we remember something, let's take an emotional memory or a strong memory, for example, when we remember it, do we experience it in the same way? Like, so first time we got on a roller coaster, we released dopamine. If we remember that first time we got on a roller coaster, is our brain doing the same thing? Like, is it going through the actions, or is it just simply, you did this thing?
There's an interaction there. With some memories, you get this really vivid reliving of that experience, and there's almost certainly a kind of an emotional component to that. You don't tend to get that for kind of mundane kind of,
where do I park my car, right? Like,
right. But those kind of seminal experiences, those experiences that might be particularly transformative to you, particularly stressful, particularly emotional. People do talk about the vividness, and then there's evidence to suggest that the vividness is much higher in those memories, and that can cause problems, right? Those sorts of mechanisms are the mechanisms that lead to the problems associated with PTSD and flashbacks and those kinds of things. So there's absolutely total variation in how some memories can be encoded and retrieved compared to others.
So does our brain, even though we actively remember something, does our brain keep all of it? We just can't get back to it? Like, if I somehow, is what I had for dinner 3 weeks ago somewhere in my brain, even though I could not think of it at all? Or does it actually just, nope, that's just gone, it's deleted?
That's a really big question. Undoubtedly, some of it is getting pruned away, but the kind of the counterexample to all of that is when you get that, you run across that particular combination of thoughts that leads you to remember something that you haven't thought about in 15 years, in 20 years, and suddenly you can remember it.
Is that kind of how our memory ultimately works? Like, you need to be able to access the memories. You need other new experiences to kind of reinforce that memory.
Yeah, so that's to reinforce the memory, to re-encode the memory, right? So one of the analogies that you can think about when it comes to reconsolidating memory is tracing paper. So you have your original memory, you've got let's say a picture drawn on that sheet of tracing paper. Then you put another sheet of paper over it and trace it out again. That's going to be ever so slightly different, but it's going to, broadly speaking, look like what you had underneath. But you think about that thing, or you talk about that memory over and over and over again. That's a new sheet of tracing paper, over the top, over the top, over the top. Eventually, what you are remembering is going to be probably a caricature of what you had originally, and that's if you're being kind of generous. It might be that you've just missed out some things altogether. It might be that it looks totally different, and that's all about kind of how you have re-encoded that memory every time you've brought it to mind. So you've got this idea of brain of kind of memory plasticity in there. Every time you bring a memory to mind, you bring it out in a kind of fragile form that what you do with it at that point makes a difference to how it's going to be kind of laid down and remembered again in the future. So it's one of the reasons that there are, depending on the country you're in, the police force you're dealing with, there are quite strict rules about how, for example, police can interview you about something that you might be asked to testify about in court, because they can quite potentially influence that by asking you leading questions and shifting and altering your memory, getting you to kind of draw these bits that they want you to talk about bigger, or miss out the bits that they don't want you to talk about, to use that tracing paper analogy.
Ooh, are you ready for some harder / listener submitted questions?
All right, go for it.
Why do we remember music so well? Why can I just suddenly recite the lyrics for a song that I haven't heard in 15 years?
There's probably a few different ways to answer this, right? So one is the emotionality of music. Music, for depending on the song, depending on the person, depending on the time of your life, it can be a really emotional experience. That emotion adds another hook, another way of getting to that combination of kind of neuronal activity that leads to a memory being retrieved. So that's one way of looking at it. Another is that experience of knowing a song inside out that you knew that you listened to when you were 18, when you were 25. That's a really common experience. That period from 15 to 25, that leads to something called a reminiscence bump. Whether it's music, whether it's the players that played for your favorite sports team, whether it's the nights out you had, we remember those things from that reminiscence bump, 15 to 25, better than any other period of our life. So that's when our brain is healthiest. That's when there's really significant stuff going on in our lives, lots of hooks to attach those memories to, and it's just one of those. It's as close to a rule within a law within psychology as we've got. 15 to 25 leads to a reminiscence bump. It leads to really memorable memories.
Yeah, I can remember those years very, very well because they're new experiences kind of going out in the world. Your brain is fresh. There's emotions to it.
Yeah.
Love for the first time.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You're feeling things deeply.
Does looking at a picture make you remember the picture and not the actual event?
Yes. Yes, it influences your memory. Absolutely. Whether or not it entirely shifts your memory to that picture is a different question. But there have been all sorts of studies, for example, where this effect has been tested even for things that never happened, right? So for photoshopped pictures of, for example, someone riding in a hot air balloon in their childhood when they never did, you can show someone that picture, give them a bit of time, and eventually they will come to believe that actually happened.
This is my wife is a huge, she looks at the picture right after. I never will look at it. I'll never look at it.
I find pictures almost painful, actually. I don't know why. I take pictures, but I seldom look at them. And I think partly that's that there's something painful about that experience lost almost. I'm no longer there. It's no longer part of me. But yeah.
I feel the exact same way. That's exactly the way that I feel. That like, no, I don't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the best memory trick that you know? Like, if you want to remember something, what is the best memory trick?
Anything that you relate to yourself is something that you will remember better. So anything that you process deeply, that you think about, that you reflect on, you integrate into your life, your story, anything that has meaning to you is better remembered. And that's the most powerful kind of memory effect, and the most reliable thing that will predict whether you'll remember something or not. It's like how much you've worked with it, how much it means to you, how much you can integrate it into your life story, or what it is you're doing, or what it is you're good at.
Have you heard of memory palaces?
No.
A memory palace is one of these mnemonic devices. So to do, this device of memory that you can use to bootstrap off of to make your memory really, really good. What you can do is think of a house that you know really well. For a lot of people, this would be like this might be their current house, it might be their childhood home, right? And plot a route through that house. So you go in the front door, you go into the hallway, you go into the sitting room, you see various things. You do this for every single room, right? Every point of interest in that house, in that memory palace, you can attach a memory to, right? So you can think about if you're trying to remember a particular the title of a particular book, you can think about placing the words for the title of that book in specific locations in your memory palace. That way, when you come to trying to remember that thing, you're taking that route through your house, and you're trying to use all of these things that you know so well to act as cues, to act as reminders to those specific things that you're trying to remember.
Are there certain things that we generally remember better? Like, you're going to remember colors better than sounds, or places rather than faces. Like, are there things that our memory seems to be more geared towards remembering than other things?
Yeah, so there's a lot of variation, but a lot of the time, what we tend to be universally quite good at is spatial memory. So memory for how we navigate to places. It's why a lot of memory researchers who do translational work, so who do work in animals and try and translate that knowledge into humans, that they will often do, for example, spatial tasks in rodents, because that's the kind of best analog for human memory. That's they might argue the building blocks off of which human memory is built. So spatial memory is really good, and spatial memory is also part of the kind of mnemonic devices that I was talking about. The memory palaces rely on routes through a memory palace, routes through, for example, a childhood house, because we tend to remember those patterns better. We tend to find it easiest to remember those things.
Oh, even just sitting here, I can't, like, thinking back to my childhood home, I can't remember what color the couch is, but I remember how far away from the TV it was.
Right.
Are we more defined by our ability to remember or our ability to forget?
Oof, my goodness.
I know. That one was like, oh, that's deep.
So it's a philosophical question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think since the 19th century, an American philosopher stroke psychologist, William James, he said that if we remembered everything, we'd be as bad off as if we forgot everything. So obviously, I'm gonna fudge it a bit by saying the best response to that is that what you need is the correct balance between remembering and forgetting. You want to forget the bad things that happen to you, and you want to remember the good things, and you want to be able to control what comes to mind and when, and you don't want to have to dwell on bad, negative stuff. So, and also you want to remember what's important and not what's important. And like, again, it's not such a exciting example, but we often talk about like your memory wants to work so that you can remember where you parked your car today. You don't want to remember where you parked it yesterday. That's of no use to you. When you go back to the car park, you want to remember where you parked your car today. So again, I think that's how I'm going to answer that. We need to get the right balance between remembering everything and forgetting everything, and just the balance between what we need and what we want to remember and what should be forgotten.